everybody, and welcome to Responsible AI in Action with the Responsible AI Institute, where we are speaking with some of the leading voices in responsible AI. I'm very excited. We have David Gleason joining us on the show today. David, thank you so much for being here.
Patrick, thank you. Great to be here.
It's great getting the opportunity to chat with you, David. I've had the opportunity to meet you in person here in New York City, and I've had the opportunity to just kind of learn a bit more about your background, kind of what's brought you to the space, what you're doing in the responsible AI space as well, especially with Spark 92. You really have this incredible career. You've had many years of experience as a chief data and analytics officer, and you are currently the head of responsible AI at Spark 92. So I'm wondering if we could start there, if you could share with our listeners, what does this type of role look like, and what type of challenges are you tackling?
Happy to try my best to explain it. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm not exactly sure what my job will look like that day because, as you know, as everybody knows, everything is changing so quickly in the world of artificial intelligence that every day is interesting, but that's what makes it worth getting up in the morning. So what we're really working on doing at Spark 92 is how can we help our customers, our clients, make sure that when they're building artificial intelligence solutions, that they're building solutions that are safe and scalable and responsible and trustworthy. And that is obviously a very difficult thing to do, and is probably made more difficult by all of the rapid advances in generative AI specifically that we've seen over the last 18 to 24 months. So a lot of what we're working with people on is everything from sort of the bare metal level, how do you test and train models and make sure that you're eliminating bias in traditional AI models, all the way through concepts like model governance and accountability and risk management to make sure that companies are taking sort of a full scale view of what the risks of AI are and how they can manage those. So that's a lot of fun. And because Spark 92 has a relatively long heritage of building AI solutions, we've built a lot of fairly sophisticated AI solutions in the past, but this concept of how now do you take a much more thoughtful approach to the safety and the integrity of these solutions has really been an interesting challenge to peel back because, like I said, everything is changing so quickly in the market that as soon as you think you've figured out how to deal with a specific type of large language model, for example, some new technique is unleashed and you've got to begin doing more research and more learning on that.
Yeah. I think what I've come to discover is, of course, there's a lot of conversations around responsible AI and its importance. And as you brought up, there are so many different facets and sectors when it comes to responsible AI. I'm wondering if you could share with us, at least in your experience thus far, with the understanding that we're all still figuring this out, have you found that tackling one specific area at a time has been most helpful, or has it kind of been more so trying to tackle all of these areas in a more broad sense at the same time?
That's a really good question. And I certainly can't claim that we figured it out entirely, but one of the biggest challenges we've seen at clients has just been exactly that. If you think about responsible AI, it touches on so many domains and so many areas of expertise, ranging from AI engineering expertise to privacy to cybersecurity, risk management, and a whole bunch of other competencies in an organization. And that makes it really confusing sometimes for companies to figure out who actually should be driving responsible AI and who needs to be thinking about it. So the one thing we have learned is we need to spend some time level setting up front that this is I'll call it a multidisciplinary approach. And you do need to have all of those different viewpoints at the table as you're looking at responsible AI. So you can't start it with just a data management, data governance lens, or just a regulatory compliant lens or a data privacy officer lens. You've got to have all of those viewpoints at the table. Now, the other way of slicing it then is clearly that you can't tackle all forms of AI in every project in your organization at one time. So what does seem to make a lot of sense is rolling it out in a very intentional way where you start with some high risk and high visibility projects and start to build and fine tune that management and governance framework around those projects, and then roll it out more broadly, progressively, because there will be a lot of tuning and adjusting the process and the way that people interact as you broaden that scope.
Yeah, that really resonates with me a lot. In a lot of ways, this takes a village, and you're absolutely right with regards to the multidisciplinary approach. And it often involves organizations coming together to kind of tackle these thorny issues. Of course, Spark 92 is a valued member of the Responsible AI Institute. And so it really takes people coming together to figure out these issues. And that kind of brings me to my next question. This week we saw the New York Post, as well as many other publications, that have announced that Meta and Apple, these two rivals for so many years, they may be partnering together to integrate Meta's generative AI model into Apple's AI systems for iPhones. And Apple plans to add technology from other AI companies onto its devices as well. And Anthropic has been in discussions with Apple about bringing its generative AI to Apple Intelligence. I would love to hear your thoughts on this article, David. What does it mean for AI with these big tech companies coming together? Is there any way to ensure that their operations are going to be done responsibly? And another kind of add-on question to that is what does this mean for smaller AI companies?
So those are really good questions. And it's funny because this whole conversation about what Apple is going to do and who they're partnering with has a little bit of a Shakespearean drama flavor to it, where the idea that the microcosm echoes the macrocosm. So, or I think it's vice versa. But, in this case, everything is changing so quickly around the story about who Apple may be negotiating with, which is reflective of the overall AI environment and how fast that space is changing. And I say that because on June 23rd of this year, the Wall Street Journal, I think it was, first broke the news that Apple and Meta were negotiating about the use of Meta's models as part of the overall Apple Intelligence platform. Yesterday was June 25th. So 2 days later, a second set of reports in Bloomberg and Reuters came out saying, yes, Apple and Meta did talk, but they broke off those discussions months ago and have agreed not to pursue those any further. Now, we will never know
Oh,
necessarily
wow.
what the real story was, but it's sort of indicative of just how hard it is to pin down reality in this space. But stepping back from that for a second, here's the way I look at this. So Apple, first of all, has done something very interesting. They really have a 3-tier model for how they're leveraging large language models with Apple Intelligence. So the first is they're putting as much as they can on the chip or on the device. So the Apple Intelligence is only going to run on fairly recent devices with high-end chips, and they're doing as much of the large language model processing as they can on device. And one of the primary motivations for doing that, in addition to performance, is privacy and security. So that says that they're taking that fairly seriously. The next tier, when you have queries that are beyond what can be handled on device, because that will out of necessity be a relatively small model on the device. Most people are estimating it'll be probably a 3 billion parameter model, and it would have to be quantized down to something less than its full precision to fit on the available memory of those devices. So when you have a query that exceeds the capability of those devices, it will go to the private cloud computing environment that Apple has set up, which is also very interesting because it is, as I understand it, entirely Apple hardware run in Apple data centers with an Apple developed and owned foundation model and all Apple software stack. So that means that thus far, when you get up to that second tier, you're still running on completely proprietary Apple model. Now, the third tier is when that question involves what Apple calls current world knowledge or full world knowledge, or it's very domain specific, like a question about medical research, for example. That is when Apple would hand off that query to some of their partners. And the first announced partner was OpenAI and the ChatGPT model. And other partners could be Google or Anthropic or Perplexity and potentially others. Apparently, if we believe the latest reports, it won't be Meta, but you never know. And without going into too much detail, they've actually taken some real steps to ensure privacy when your query is handed off to those third parties, around asking for permission every single time, or on getting guarantees that those companies will not attempt to capture and preserve any of your queries to use for training in the future. And they're obfuscating all of your personal data, including even your IP address. So taken as a whole, I actually look at this very as a positive development, because what it says is that Apple has probably given us the best blueprint I've seen to date for how to manage privacy in a multi-model situation where you have the ability to bring different large language models to bear on the task, but doing it in a way that, to the extent possible, maximizes privacy. So I hope that that becomes a blueprint that others in the industry can follow.
Yeah, there's so many complexities that are involved in just addressing how AI is going to be carried out and how we're going to see things through as things continue to develop. And David, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me for this conversation, to contextualize some of this for us and to really put things into perspective as we continue to think critically on how AI is being developed. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the work that you do as well. Before we head out, I'm wondering if you could just share with our listeners where they could find out more information about you and Spark 92 and all the work that you're doing.
Sure. So Spark 92, again, is an AI and data consulting firm. We are at spark92.com on the World Wide Web. Sorry, it's showing my age when I call it the World Wide Web, but I like to do that because my daughter always makes fun of me for saying it that way. Best way to find me is probably on LinkedIn at David R. Gleason. And Patrick, I just also want to thank you and the whole Institute, because the Institute has been a great partner and a tremendous source of knowledge for us as we've worked to navigate this ever-changing landscape of regulations and concerns around AI and really understand how to navigate this world. So thank you to you and your whole team too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure to include the links to those various resources as well in our show description for all of our listeners out there. Go check it out. David, thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you. See you, Patrick.